So I don't think we've met. I know these two, so welcome. What's your name?
I'm there.
Derek, I'm Nader. Nice to meet you. So what brings you in?
I took the coding class.
Okay, nice.
And I've been in IT for about 15 years now. So I've used AI in helping me learn how to code or solve problems with my code. And I also do content creation, so I use it to my description for YouTube to post my speeds. And so anything that I can learn personally and professionally to get better at whatever I do is my main thing. I use it constantly. It's kind of replaceable one day.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about here might be just stuff you already know. Hopefully I'll add in a few additional things. But how long have you been with Mississippi Coding Academy?
I started last September, and I think
Oh, you're about to graduate then soon. Yeah, how are you liking it?
I learned a lot. I think I've been learning it and not exploring it outside of whatever language they give us. And then to find out on the back end that it's been improved, like going from HTML to CSS and then Bootstrap, and learning Bootstrap is just simplified. Just learning those and then finding what I like and what fits. So far, I like React. JS a lot better than a lot of the other things that I've used. I know my job is SQL, so that was helpful for me to learn.
Oh, okay, nice.
But then at the same time,
You were using SQL in your IT work before?
They use it in my job.
Okay, they use it in your job.
Yeah,
Got
they
it.
use it in my job for databases. A lot of things. I work at databases.
Got it.
And so I wanted to learn it to kind of get an insight to when my coworkers are having a conversation. I'm listening to them talk about something I don't know. Pick up on it. So just learning that and trying to get more familiar with JavaScript. I thought it was just going to be something you breeze through, but they want you to know React.
Yeah, it's a whole.
Yeah, you're breathing early so you can get to the React part. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I like React a lot better. We and my class has been doing React pages probably the last 2 weeks. So we've done forms, we've done a meme generator, and we did a travel box. And so I'm just learning and want to adapt more, but I'm an old school gamer, and AI has always been a thing that I love. So just the more that I can know about it, learn about it, whether it's something I already know.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I'm also self-taught. I didn't start coding until I was like 30. So.
Well, I try to I'm kind of busy, so everything that we learn, I have access to real life, so I just go back to course like something.
Nice.
So
Yeah, it's a lifelong thing. As you probably know already, being in IT was probably the same way before.
at first I thought, the old school way to learn a whole book, and you just have to know everything about it in the text format, and then learning that it's a lot more copy and paste now. It's a lot more using other avenues. It's just but it's still learning, and that it takes more than a year.
Yeah.
It takes more than a year, and so for me now, I think is spend more time.
Nice. Hey, how you doing? Welcome. We're just doing quick intros. Do you want to give an intro
Oh, yeah.
to yourself?
Hey, my name is JavaScript.
Nice. How long have you been coding?
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I think it's no JS.
Nice. So like 15 years, 12 years, 10 years, I don't know, in that range. Nice. Okay. OG. Nice. All right, cool. So this is going to be a talk that is broken up into two parts. There's a presentation and then a bunch of live coding where I'm going to show a couple of apps that I built. And then we're going to build an app from scratch. So my name is Nader. I didn't put that up there, so that's my name. Developer of 12 years. Most recently, I've spent 4 years as a mobile developer before moving to AWS, where I worked in the cloud for 3.5 years. And then for the last 3+ years, I've worked in the blockchain space. And then 2 of those years, I was also building AI apps. I sold one of my companies within like a month and a half of starting it. I open source a mobile framework that has done really well called, how do I not remember the name of this? React Native AI. So maybe because I haven't touched it in a couple of months, but we're going to look at it today. So open source React Native AI. When it first came out, I had about 10 or 15 companies like actually build and deploy like applications using React Native AI, including a couple of like well-known banks. So it's a pretty successful project, but it doesn't really need much maintaining. It just works and people fork it and use it. So I haven't really done a lot other than update it with new models and stuff like that. So I just updated it today with like the new GPT and the new Claude models. And then I have an app in the App Store called AI Buddy. It makes me around $1,000 a month. So I consider that a success. It costs me about $50 a month to maintain. So I built in the AI world for like a year and a half maybe, and then I stopped doing it because it was just kind of distracting me from my full-time job, which was building in the blockchain world. So when people think about AI development, I think there's 2 main entry points. One is literally building the AI models and infrastructure and being like a data scientist, being a machine learning engineer. And I would rate that as being extremely hard. Not only does it take years to understand how to actually build anything that is significant, you're behind all the people that have been doing this for a long time. And it just is a lot of work and you have to kind of understand math and you have to kind of understand understand how to solve a lot of hard problems. So I would categorize building the AI models as a very hard thing to do, and getting into that would probably take years of work. But I think what we're looking at instead are building apps using those models and using the APIs that I provided, and I would categorize that as very easy. In fact, I built an app, and a lot of other people have too, that has gained tens of thousands of users, and it took like 2 days to build, just because you're tapping into a very powerful system, I guess you could call some of these models as providing. So the whole thing that I'm going to be talking about today is building with hosted AI models. So what are some of the use cases of hosted AI models? Dialogue and role play. So you can literally, as you've probably seen with this new OpenAI, have like this back and forth dialogue between you and the character, and you can program that character to role play in different ways if you would like. So you can think of like this being a good use case for games and stuff like that, where you might be talking to a specific character that you can program, and that way you don't actually have to program statically the information that's going back and forth, but instead you can do it dynamically. Summarization and Q&A. So summarization is just like throwing a bunch of information and asking it for a summary. This is probably the thing I use it for the most. I pretty much take all of the white papers that get thrown at me in the blockchain world and get them summarized in a couple of paragraphs. And then I'll go and ask questions about them after that summarization has come back. I think that's a very smart way to use these models, because you can save a lot of time and not have to read everything when you're kind of like reading and learning new things. Translation is a pretty common use case. Pretty much all these models will support this. Database querying and retrieval. This is an interesting one because you can actually use an AI system as like an entry point into a database. So instead of like querying the database using an ORM or writing the query yourself, you can basically say, I have this schema and I want to query the last 10 people who have signed up for this item in my shopping website. And the query will be created for you if you kind of program that correctly using the right prompt engineering, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. And this makes querying a lot easier. And also you can just provide queries for you to use just by asking the model to provide those. And this brings us to coding related tasks. And this is one of the things that we're going to focus on today. A lot of people like think of these AI models as just natural language, but they actually can provide APIs for you. So you can say, respond to this query and give me a JSON response. And within that JSON response, I need this key with this value, and then I want this array for this key or whatever. And it'll literally return you what a database would have in the past. So you can basically use these APIs or these AI models as databases. Classification, metadata, extraction, and analysis. So throwing, a large wall of text and, again, getting information out of that. Very similar, I guess, to summarization. Text and content generation. This is a common use case that most people know already. And then content moderation. So sticking one of these in the middle of like a chat bot for content moderation is a good example.
Quick question. Are you using Claude APIs?
I'm using Claude. I was going to go over the three models I'm going to be talking about today. Claude, OpenAI, and Cohere are like the three that I use. And I've kind of stopped using Cohere lately because Claude and OpenAI are really good.
So your app is an app store. You use both of those?
Yeah, the one that I'm using in the App Store, this is like the open source version of it. It supports GPT, GPT Turbo, Claude Instant, Cohere Web, and then Mistral and Gemini.
This is your AI buddy?
Yeah, this is the open source version of it called React Native AI. So basically, when I open sourced, I open sourced this app called Roam Around, which was a company also that I sold. And when I open sourced it and then I sold the company, someone cloned the app and then put it in the App Store and then did all this other stuff and basically stole like the same name and didn't change anything at all and caused a lot of like legal issues with the company that I sold, and I had to like deal with that for like 6 or 12 months. So when I launched my next app called AI Buddy, I didn't open source anything because I was like, someone stole all the shit and just like caused me a lot of headache. And then everyone was like, why don't you open source AI Buddy? And I was like, well, I want to, but I don't want to go through all that legal shit. So what I ended up doing was like cloning it, removing all of the proprietary payment stuff that took me a long time to program, and just open source what I would consider like the easy stuff. So if you wanted to clone this, you would have to actually build out the payments and all that stuff. And I think that's like a good trade-off. So AI Buddy looks very similar to this. The only difference is that I guess this is free, and like most people wouldn't be able to run this, but yeah. And we're going to be looking at that code in just a moment. So we looked at some of these use cases. So we'll dive deeper into dialogue and role play. What are some of the actual use cases of this? Customer support, pre-sales conversations, coaches, advisors. I saw someone, Levels.io, he like launched this app that is a counselor. And it was very controversial because some people are like, you shouldn't talk to an AI because it's a counselor. It's a very intimate thing, and most people shouldn't use that as a use case. But he made it the point that most people can't afford in the United States $100, $150 to talk to a counselor. So there's like a good trade-off having it be like 5% of that. Text summarization and Q&A. So books, product documentation, knowledge bases and records, contracts. This is really, there's just so much that you can do with just this area here. This is probably one of the most powerful and most disruptive areas because it kind of gets into education, it gets into legal, it gets into medicine, it gets into everything because it just kind of is disruptive in a lot of different ways. But also it's empowering in a lot of different ways. If you're able to kind of like build something that exposes one of these things and makes it really simple for people to use, I guess. Text and content generation, copywriting, email drafts, paper outlines, fiction generation, detailed documentation, speeches. I think when it comes to text and content generation, you might worry about, okay, if I'm going to use it for something non-trivial, then I'm probably going to worry about the consistency of all of the output. Because if I end up doing just one sentence or one paragraph, it's probably going to be fine. But if I want to generate a large amount of material, how can I make that consistent? I think that's what we're going to talk about later when it comes to the prompt engineering. Content moderation, ensuring communications adhere to internal guidelines, ensuring user adherence to terms and conditions, and trawling for acceptable use policy violations. So what a lot of people are doing is they're setting up like webhooks, or they're literally just tapping into these APIs into their chatbots on their websites or stuff like that. And they're able to just get rid of a lot of the support engineering they may have needed in the past because they're able to essentially automate that. Classification, extraction, analysis. So analysis of classification of complex tasks or large amounts of data, extraction of quotes, key information, points, and other information. And then coding related tasks. So text to SQL, literally generating code. I think unit tests are probably one of the most interesting use cases for people that still write tests, because you don't have to write tests anymore for the most part. You can literally just throw the code in there, have it write a test, you tweak something, and you're saving a ton of time. I think code documentation is also really interesting, because now you can upload massive amounts of code to to Claude, for instance. And in the past, you had like a small window, but now the window is massive, so you can pretty much upload as much as you would like and get documentation for your code. All right, so now that we know some use cases, let's look at how to use these models. And this is essentially prompt engineering. And prompt engineering, it's something that y'all probably, since it sounds like everyone here is already using these AI models, they probably already understand to an extent, but it's becoming like this whole field. I know, like, right when it became hype, people were hiring people for like $300,000 a year to do prompt engineering, but I think it's not that serious. It's just a learned task that anyone can kind of, understand just by like learning these different techniques. So before we talk prompt engineering, what is a prompt? It's basically information you pass into an LLM to get a response. It's almost like if someone's really good at Googling, they can probably make a lot more money than someone that isn't good at Googling. I think that one of the reasons I've been successful is because I'm good at Googling, and I feel like I'm pretty good at asking prompts as well. So what does this include? Task, context, information, which would be the data, the conversation and action history, instructions, examples, and more. So combining all of this into a prompt will give you a very high quality response. For example, we have this user and then we have this assistant. The user is asking for a thing, and then we're asking for the model to return a response, obviously. In the past, you might have thought of a prompt being like, what is the capital of Mississippi, or something like that. That's very simple, but when we want to go beyond that and we want to build something that is proprietary, you're going to be building out proprietary prompts. And this is kind of the value proposition for a lot of AI applications that are out there. They are building these really complicated prompts that return a response that most people can't get, and therefore they're building high value businesses on top of these. So the task context is going to be like the top level thing you ask. And I'm going to give this long example because it's a good example, I think. You'll be acting as an AI career coach named Joe, created by the company, blah, blah, blah. Your goal is to give career advice to users. And then they are kind of like asking this main base prompt. And most people might stop at that point, but you can go beyond that. You can then say, I want the tone to be a friendly customer service tone. I want this background data, documents, and image to be part of the context. Here are some documents that you can use to give the response in a proper way. Then you can ask for detailed task description and rules. Here's some important rules for this interaction. Always stay in character as Joe. If you're unsure of how to respond, say, sorry, I don't understand that. Could you repeat the question? If someone asks something relevant, say, sorry, I am Joe, and I give career advice. Irrelevant. So the irrelevant thing is pretty important. Sorry if that's not very clear. But you can build APIs by focusing just on this irrelevancy part, because you can extract, or you can basically stop the model from returning a response by saying you can only return a response based on this criteria, and if it doesn't, then don't return a response, instead return an error message or something like that. And then you might go further than that and give examples. So here's an example of how I would like the response to look, and then you're kind of like guiding it even further. You might then provide all of the conversation history that happened prior to that. And then you might say the immediate task description or request, how do you respond to the user's question? And then you might go to the very, very last step and say, think step by step. And this sounds kind of weird, but this actually really works. Literally just telling the model to think step by step, or even listing out the steps that you would like it to take. You might say step 1, step 2, step 3, and it actually works really well. But I think experimenting with all of these things, putting them together, will get you a lot further along than just asking a simple question. So what is prompt engineering? A basic example of what we might ask is like a math question. What is 2 plus 2? It equals 4. What are the steps that take into account on this question? This is a subtraction problem, or is this an addition problem, or is this a multiplication problem? We're extracting that it's an addition problem, and then we might be able to then translate that into another language. But basically, prompt engineering is the process of controlling model behavior by optimizing your prompt to elicit high-performance LLM responses. I'm just going to go through to get to this last slides. So, how to engineer a good prompt? We talked through some of the steps. We're now going to dive into some of these a little bit deeper. First of all, covering the edge cases. When you just give a very broad ask, then you're not really telling the model how to respond. So providing edge cases like these will, just make your response be a lot more, just a lot better, I guess you could say. So you might say, not enough information to yield a good answer, poor user input, overly complex user input, or no user input whatsoever, things to take into account. Okay, we're just going to go now into the different techniques that you can apply. So first of all, be clear and direct. Models respond best to clear and direct responses or direct instructions. Numbers and list instructions step by step for complex tasks. When in doubt, follow the golden rule of clear prompting. Show your prompt to a colleague and ask them if they can follow the instructions themselves and produce the exact result you're looking for. Number 2, assign roles. This is something that I think was introduced directly into OpenAI, where you kind of say, you are this, your job is to respond in this manner. But I think pretty much all these models allow you just to pass this in as text now. So you can basically say, you are a master logic bot designed to answer complex logic questions. And then you ask the prompt, but it's like pre-pinned by this context of what that model kind of is, or the persona that they have. Adding XML tags allows you to really define where the information that you're pointing out needs to kind of be parsed from. So instead of just saying, what is the best looking restaurant out of these 10 options in whatever city, and then just pasting in the text, you might then separate that by some XML tags. These could be quotation marks. They could be anything that kind of defines the parsing of the information from the main prompt to the context that you're passing in. And I think a lot of these models allow you to actually upload files and things like that. So depending on how you're building your app, you might just be doing that anyway. So next, use structured prompt templates. So you could think of prompts like functions of programming, separate the variables from the instructions. So again, going back to that XML formatting, where we're kind of like separating different pieces of the prompt from the text, and then adding some type of way to parse the prompt itself. Or I would say separating the prompt from the context that you're passing in. And then you can even steer the model by pre-filling the model's response. So you might say, return JSON format with these keys, and then you might just pass in like the first value as the assistant prefill, and then it will fill in the rest. So in this case, we're passing in the JSON object, and we're getting the rest of the JSON. And this is just an example of that, I guess you could say. And then going back to that step-by-step example, an example of what that might look like in practice. Here is a complex LSAT multiple choice logic puzzle. What is the correct answer? Think step by step. And then you'll notice that the output is just much different or much better.
Why is that?
I have no idea. It's just a weird intricacy, I guess. It's just like one of those hack things. And you might even assume that within 6 months or a year, this won't even be relevant because they might,
It's part of the default.
Yeah, exactly. Because like a lot of this stuff becomes irrelevant like 6 months later because it becomes part of the service.
Yeah.
Just like that whole, we went over the, like, you are a school teacher, your job is to blah, blah, blah. Like that used to be a part of the API, but now you just ask it because it just works that way. So I think I'm going to skip over the rest of these because it's already 6:36 and I want to go over some live coding. Okay, so yeah, let's now go into some coding, and we're basically gonna look at the React Native AI app, and then we're gonna like start from scratch building an app. I'm going to make my terminal much bigger. All right, so just to kick things off, I'm going to create a Next.js app and get that going, and then we're going to lead and then come back. So I'm going to do npx create next app, my AI app, and I'm just going to take all the defaults here and let that get set up. And what we're going to next do is jump into React Native AI. So I think one of the most interesting things to like consider when you're maybe building something is like really how simple these apps are for the most part. If you look at ChatGPT, for example, it's a very simple interface. The value is the API that's sitting behind it. If you look at some of the more popular like apps that are out there, I guess Perplexity is one of them. Has anyone used Perplexity AI? So like a lot of these apps are essentially just the exact same interface that you're essentially able to build yourself. So I think if you're building an AI app, you have two main options. You can try to compete with like Perplexity and OpenAI and Claude by building something like what this is, because you're aggregating all these different models together, and you're able to then have like 10 different models to choose from a single user interface, which is pretty cool. But beyond that, you can't really compete with them in the quality of service because they're going to probably beat you there because they're focusing just on their one model. So if you look at the new version of ChatGPT, it has like vision and all the stuff kind of built into one thing. So you might not be able to compete there. So you can compete, you can either build by aggregating a lot of models into a single UI, which is what this is. And I think that there's a lot of room for improvements and disruption there. And then the other thing is like taking a very specialized approach and building for a very specialized use case. So an example of that is Roam Around, and I don't even know if it's still live. Yeah, so Roam Around was an application of this, and this is the company that I sold, and it basically is just a travel planner that uses the AI model under the hood to kind of power the interface. And when it first started off, it was just a text response where you would say, I'm going to Japan, I'm going to Tokyo for 3 days, give me a good itinerary. And it came back with a really good itinerary. And it blew people away at the time because a lot of people had never really used these AI models, but it was just a very specialized use case that really clicked with a lot of people. They made that 100 times better, though, once they took the company over and they started adding in hotels and restaurants and ways to click around and all this stuff. You're never going to see ChatGPT build out a UI that's focused just on restaurants and just on traveling that can compete with that. So like I guess where I'm going with this is you can either compete by aggregating these models or by finding a very specialized use case, which would be something like Roam Around, which is basically a travel app. But you can kind of think of applying legal or medicine or whatever, education, and kind of finding a way to build a nice user interface on top of these. So with that being said, let's kind of take a look at how it looks to interact with these models. So right here we have, this is the React Native AI, which is essentially the same as AI Buddy, which is in the App Store. I think I need to reload this because I'm restarting it from a new internet connection. Basically, the core gist of this is like you have a chat and you can choose different models. So it's like I mentioned, it supports GPT, it supports Claude, it supports Cohere. It has an assistant, which is essentially the OpenAI Assistant API, which I don't even know if it's relevant anymore at this point with the new version of OpenAI. It has the ability to create images, so you can use OpenAI or like 10 or so other different models to choose the image that you would like to create. And then it has a way to kind of change the theme. So you have Miami, which is based on the React Miami theme. Actually, I know it's Miami football team. That's what it was anyway. Vercel theme, light theme, Hacker News theme, whatever. So I might use the light theme. And then you can kind of like just ask for an image to be created or chat. But I think the interesting thing is like how this code works. So what we have going on here is a React Native front end and a Node.js backend. And you can easily just call these backends by passing in the model that you like to use and getting a response back. But what you'll notice is that in pretty much all of the apps, there's a streaming response. So you're getting the text coming back as it's coming back. So I can say, what are some fun things to do in Mississippi? And I might choose the model to be the new GPT-4. And as you can see, the response is coming back streaming. So when you're building your app, you probably want this functionality. And you have to kind of basically implement this either yourself from scratch using what is basically going to be custom functionality on the client and on the server, or you can use something like the Vercel AI SDK, which is what we're going to be using in our live coding demo. But what is happening is you're getting this event stream and you're basically using the event source API on the server, and you get this streaming response back, and then you chop it up and then kind of send it to the client. I'm kind of going to talk through pseudocode. We are looking at the ChatGPT. No, okay, I'm sorry. We're looking at the front end here. Okay, this is the ChatGPT API endpoint. We're calling api.openai.com/chat/completions, and we're setting this value stream to be true. And instead of just returning a single response, it returns this streaming response essentially. And what we're doing is we're calling a response.body.getReader, and then we're saying if this exists, we are getting these two values out of reader.read. When we call reader.read, it's going to return either done or it's going to return a value. And it'll keep returning that value until it's done. Once it's done, then we can exit the function. And if there is a value, we essentially need to parse that information. And then we send it back to the client by calling response.write. This is the server. The client then receives that on the front end right here, where we're getting this event source that's piping in, and we're checking if the event dot type is message. If it is a message, then we're doing some work to parse the actual text and then update the local state to kind of append the text to this long chunk of text. And that is being called right here, where we're kind of updating the local state by calling set OpenAI response, set Mistral response, set blah, blah, blah response. And we are then just appending new messages there. This is actually a lot of like boilerplate code that you have to deal with. But I think the coolest thing is that you don't have to write any of this stuff to get started, which is what we're going to be doing in just a moment. We're going to use the Vercel AI SDK that abstracts away not only the client stuff, but the server stuff as well. But the general idea on the back end of this app is that we have this chat folder, and we have all of the different models supported individually because they all have slightly different APIs. So we have Claude, we have Cohere, we have Gemini, we have GPT, and we have Mistral. And each one of these kind of like does the same thing in a slightly different way. And that's kind of how the backend works. It's pretty simple to run this app. The only thing you need to do is clone the app and set up your .env folder with all the environment variables on the server. And then it basically will just work. Does anyone have any questions for any of that stuff?
It's fast as 4.0 is now on responses. Do you think streaming from the server is going to continue to be a thing for a while, or do you think we're going to get the break in return? That's just looking at it.
I think it depends on the size of the result. I think if it's like a massive result, then streaming is going to be best. But if it's something small, then yeah, you might as well just bring that back.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you're right.
All that.
Yeah, it's super fast. I haven't even tried it without the streaming, to be honest. So, but I think that that GPT still uses streaming as well on their website. So, all right, cool. So, what we're going to do is go ahead and change into this new app here, and we're going to go ahead and try to build out a new app. And if you have been doing coding and all this stuff, have you used any of these APIs yet? Okay, cool. This might be extra relevant, I think, to some stuff that you might be interested in, because like as you're going to see, we'll probably be able to build something in just a few minutes. So the main entry point to every Next.js app is just going to be app/page.tsx. And I'm going to go to localhost 3000. And I'm going to delete all of this code here. And we now just have this empty hello world. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Vercel AI SDK. And I'm going to install it, because you can just do npm install AI, which is pretty cool. I'm going to do yarn add AI. And I'm going to go to their docs. What's that? Oh, just Google Vercel AI SDK. Vercel. Yeah. And this provides you pretty much with everything that you need to get started. It looks like in addition to AI, there's a couple of other dependencies that I wasn't aware of. So I'm just going to go ahead and install those. So I've already installed AI. I'm also going to install AI SDK / OpenAI and Zod. Looks like I'm having a little trouble with my bandwidth, so I might switch to another Wi-Fi network. I wonder if NPM is down. It's working okay for you? I keep getting caught up at either 14 or 13 out of 377 packages, which is kind of strange. There we go. Looks like it's moving along now. I'm just going to add these other two dependencies. And while that's installing, we're going to go to our folder structure and create a .env.local file called .env.local. And then we're going to add an OpenAI key value that looks like that. And that's basically all you have to do to get all set up. So you install the dependencies, you add .env.local, and you set your OpenAI API key. So I'm going to go to OpenAI, and I'm going to get a new API key. And you can just Google OpenAI API key if you don't already have an account. Okay, it looks like there's a new way to create API keys, so that's cool. I'm going to go ahead and click Create New Secret Key. And I will create this key, copy it, and then all I need to do is just drop it here. And we are good to go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create a route handler at app/API/chat/route.ts. So I'll create an API folder. And then now you can just drop in this boilerplate code, which they give you. And then you can pass in an API call to this route with any text, and it'll just return that streaming response like we did before, which allows you to pretty much build like the same interface that OpenAI has with just text at least. So you would call /API/chat, get a response, and the streaming response will be managed on the client. So what we're going to do is build like two different apps, one that just streams text, and then the other that streams JSON for you to actually build an API out of your OpenAI backend. So on the UI, I'm literally just going to copy and paste all this code and then walk through it. I'm going to zoom in a little more. So we're using use client because it's a client-side component. We're importing this use chat hook, and use chat is going to give us these four values, I guess you could say, or parameters: messages, input, handle input change, and handle submit. The messages is going to be the array of messages that come back. Input is going to be the text that we're typing. The handle input change is going to change when we're typing, and the handle submit is going to be the button handler that we're going to be calling. And then we're going to map over the messages, display those there. And if we go back to our app, I'm going to change I think I'll change this CSS. Maybe I'll remove all this CSS for now. I wonder why it's at the bottom there. Oh, okay, it's meant to be that way, okay. It looks like they have looks like they've set the CSS to do that on purpose. I guess they like the chat to be at the bottom. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to go back here and look at the prompt that we asked here. What are some fun things to do in Mississippi? I need to change some CSS real quick. Yeah. The text black or something? There we go. So what are some fun things to do in Mississippi? And now we have the streaming response coming back. So we basically built like a really ugly version of OpenAI. All right, so that's pretty basic, but I think the cool stuff has to do with programming APIs that respond with JSON formatted information. So this is interesting, but what if we could return this in a JSON response and then use it in different ways and stuff like that? So what I would probably consider wanting is to return this response not in a streaming format or in a way for us to manage that streaming format in a little better way, because the JSON is going to start appending and it's going to look kind of ugly. So what we're going to start off with is probably just leaving it as it is, I guess. But what we want to do is we want to append something to the message that's going, I guess, to OpenAI. So I guess that's what we need to do next. So let's see where we have this input. I'm just going to now try to just code something to see if it works. I'm going to try to do use state from React. I'm going to swap out this handle input change handler to handle new input change. And we want to set some pretext that's going to say something more custom. We're going to say, you are an API and you can only respond in JSON format. Your job is to be a travel advisor. If someone asks for anything else, return something. If a travel question is asked, respond with the following format. And then here we can kind of define our JSON response. So I can say, might say, I don't know, category, and then we might say travel category, i.e. park, shopping, historic, etc. And then name of the location. I don't know if this is going to work, by the way, but this is the general idea. This is kind of like where you would start. And then you would kind of, update that. And then when you call the handler, what you're hoping is that this will be enough to kind of like guide the backend to return the right type of response. Just going to see, looks like I have an error somewhere. Oh, okay, I think I see. All right, so I might ask, like, what are, let me try to change this again. Okay, so it looks like when we're changing the text, we're now adding all of this, which makes sense. So now I need to figure out how to only add that before the function gets called. I'm going to try to move this over here. I'm going to go jump into their API docs real quick. I think I'm going to rewrite some of this. So I'm going to do some work real quick. And then I'll walk through this once I get it working. Sorry. So instead of using their a lot of their tooling, I'm just kind of going to rewrite a lot of this from scratch because it's making a lot of assumptions. It's kind of a very big abstraction, and I think it takes away a little bit of like your custom control. All right, we're going to have a function that's called generates. And we can then, we created this model already. And we can call model dot something. All right, finally, I think we got there. I'm just going to try to run this now. What we can do is call this generate function, wait for the text to respond, and then set response, passing in the text. And let's try this. Just need to set that input to be black. I think I need to set the API key. Now I'm having trouble saying the API key. Well, it looks like I might be failing on this example here. So I think instead of wasting any more time, I'll just walk through like what would happen if I was able to configure the API key. The general idea is that like when we ask this question to a chatbot with this pretext, we can essentially kind of see what would happen. But imagine taking this and actually programmatically using it in your app. So what are 10 cool things to do in Mississippi? Or we're gonna prepin this with UR and API, blah blah blah. Maybe we'll do this way. And there we're getting the JSON back. So the idea is basically to treat, the idea is basically like treating the model as an API, and then getting this type of response back allows you to essentially move past the natural language part and use it as an actual backend. So if we were to make this call, we're asking a question, but we're receiving a response that looks more like what would come back from an API. So we're getting category, historic, name, Vicksburg National Military Park, category natural, name, Natchez Trace Parkway, category cultural, blah, blah, blah. What you could then do is loop over those in your UI, add some nice CSS. You now have like a very basic, cool travel app. Now you can apply this to just all sorts of things. So that's kind of like the main gist of like, I think using these models as like backends or APIs. So, and then realizing like you can pretty much ask for any type of response. So I think pretty much most of us work with JSON, but if you can kind of imagine different depths of formatting, you can ask for like objects with arrays that have objects, just pretty much whatever you want. I've seen some pretty crazy stuff. And the more that you kind of like fine tune that, the better it gets and the more that you can do with it. So that's about it. If you want to run the app that we looked at earlier, you can go to my GitHub. I have my 6 top open source projects pinned right here. The one we looked at is React Native AI. And it has all the instructions to run this. And it showed the different color schemes and all that stuff. So that's it. GitHub.com/Dabit3. DABIT and the number 3. Yeah, right there.
I already had it.
Think we're good. Okay, sure.
Ashley, she's asking, is any user input data ever saved on your app?
Is any user input data
Ever saved on your app?
ever saved on your app? Not on my app. We don't even save like the history, which is the feature that I want to add, but maybe give the user an option to do that. But yeah. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. My huge crowd here. So where do y'all hang out?